When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger for thousands of appetizing ingredients that inspire countless mouth-watering meals. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices. Plus, extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with points. So you can get big flavors and big savings. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Hey folks, welcome to the Unsung Podcast. I'm Mark. I will in a minute be joined by Chris. But before we dive into this week's episode, I just wanted to give you a little bit of context about what we're going to do this week and next. So, over the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about the music of Black Sabbath. That's right, that band with 19 records and like 40 different singers. We're going to do a whole episode on them. But before we get to that episode, it turns out that Chris actually has a connection to Black Sabbath. So this week, we're going to interview Aron Ward, who plays in the bands Olanza, Harpoon, Repoman, many more. However, he's also the son of the original Black Sabbath drummer, Bill Ward, so we thought it'd be really good to get him involved to chat a little bit about his dad's band, which is pretty fucking cool. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this episode. Here's our interview with Aron Ward. Welcome. This is Unsung. You may be getting video just now. You might not be. Sorry if you're not. It is what it is, I guess. But this is a full unabridged interview with Aron Ward, and he's just waved. Hopefully you've seen that. If not, if it's just audio, then again, apologies. It's really entertaining though. So thank you, Aron, for joining us. Chris, I believe you had something you wanted to say before we get into the flow.
Yeah, I mean, so people that are subscribers to the podcast and people that are just familiar with the podcast, especially if you heard the Christmas episodes, will probably know of the band Olanza. Olanza's a band that is part of the record club, but we've also discussed just in the context, I think it's twice in the last couple of years, about, you know, being some of our outstanding releases of that year. Aron, you're allowed to blush at this point. I've known Aron for a while, also in the context of other bands. So you've got Harpoon, you got Repoman, you got, was it Bryn Ward?
Yeah, Brown Ward is, yeah.
I've still got my YCVN t-shirt from years back. Super No Friendo, is that one of your projects?
Yeah.
Vostok, Totality, and also Exceptional Beasts, which I think might be relevant later on, given what we're here to talk about today. What people probably won't know is that Aron of Olanza is also Aron Ward, as in the son of Bill Ward, the original drummer and founder of Black Sabbath, the definitive drummer of Black Sabbath, which makes Aron really suitable for this discussion for a number of reasons, not just because of the style of music he plays, but because of his proximity to the band itself and the insight I think he's got, having been basically steeped in this from birth, like Obelix from Asterix and like the Super Juice, you know what I mean? So Aron, thanks for taking part in this. I feel like even if you weren't related to Bill Ward, you'd have something to contribute to this, because I know the kind of music you listen to and stuff like that, but I think that makes it especially interesting to get your take on things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, you know, I guess as far as like being surrounded by it, since I was born, there's this like, was it kind of nature versus nurture thing that really applies to what I was, because I'm just in it anyway. But I think also I grew up as a fan from even there was never really a time that I wasn't into Sabbath, except for maybe when I was like 10 or something like that. And I was doing like, I'd have to listen to Duran Duran to counter that kind of thing, because I started to kind of rebel, like you do when you're little and stuff like that. Yeah, like the kind of how I've inherited that, or how I've gotten into that music myself and musicality. It's almost more of an attitude and an approach to how you do music. So I kind of wrote, I was like thinking about this earlier, and I was kind of writing stuff down in my head and kind of just being like, remembering my dad always being like, like, this is before I was even doing any music, like, don't compromise. You're like, don't let any bullshit in from the outside world, it's like, but that's how they were as well. Like, as a unit, that's how Sabbath was, and also like refining your song down to like the core of what it should be, and like really working on that, and that's, those principles are kind of like ingrained, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually of all of my friends, you're probably one of the most eclectic in your music. I mean,
yeah,
I've seen you perform in pretty much every genre going, apart from maybe electro swing.
Yeah,
at this point.
yeah. Oh, I wonder why. Yeah, yeah. I guess like really, it was just that thing of like hearing that early on. I'd be playing the Star Wars toys, and he'd still be going on about it. But also seeing how they were as a band, like how they were eclectic. They didn't. It's a bit weird, isn't it, with Sabbath? How like they just kind of went and started doing more. Like they just got weirder and weirder as the albums went on. You could say more experimental, but then I don't know. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just thinking about this like weird. Yeah, like it's just it's so integral. It's so important to just do whatever the fuck you want to do. That's the thing. Like, and that was kind of what I was kind of getting at, I guess, is like,
I think like one thing, and this is me just kind of spitballing here, but I'm curious whether that eclecticism came from you innately, or whether you were surrounded by an eclectic array of music through all your stages of growing up, from young childhood into your like middle and late teens. Did the eclecticism come from the musical people around you, or did you just have like a really curious nature? Like,
no, I think it came from the things you're around, the people I was around, and all of my mates when I was growing up were all like in their early 20s. So, because if we're on the road, I didn't have many friends around. This is like, boo-hoo. This is just literally like, hey, cool, these are my friends. But, they'd be listening to like the Police or fucking Zappa or loads of jazz, all that kind of shit going on. Loads of weird electronic music that just was random. My dad loved Moondog. That was kind of what was going on. It's just so weird. Like I have memories of like, picking up like a Beach Boys 8-track and going like, why is this in the house? Like as a 6-year-old, like going, should I throw this away? Like, I don't hate the Beach Boys, but I'm like, is this wrong? Like, I don't know if this belongs here. It's that kind of, it's so eclectic. Like it's so over the top, like just a sponge, like absorbing all that from different sides.
We've got like a little run of questions that we've sort of prepared for you. We might go off script a couple of times when things come up, but let me just kick us off with something related to what we just said. Obviously you've been around Sabbath since you arrived on this planet. How big an influence has Black Sabbath been on your own musical style? Mark wondered, I think you'd asked whether or not Aron had tried getting into drums really early on as well.
Yeah, I know you're a guitar player for the most part, right? So I don't know if your dad was like, oh, fuck, he's doing that. The reason I'm asking that is because I don't know, I think I brought this up for the third time in a podcast. Dromeo, I don't know if you've ever watched Dromeo.
I've heard about it. Sounds
It's brilliant. They just did an interview with Phil Collins and his son. Obviously his son is a really good drummer as well and has played with Genesis and stuff like that. And he was brought up, like, he wasn't brought up to play drums, but he wanted to be a drummer and he just did it, and his dad was like, I'll let him do it. But you can tell his dad's quite proud of the fact that my son is also doing really good drums. You know what I mean? So I was kind of wondering that about you. Yeah,
like it was like when I was really small, that was the first thing, I'd be put behind the drum kit, and you're going like, dude, like you're really small, and like you're in this kit with an array of drums going on. So I couldn't reach the rototoms, which was a bummer because they sounded so fucking good. Or those Canon, the big ones, like, and all this kind of stuff on the outside. because you're a kid, you're also just, you know, and be like around all these instruments. I'd end up like sleeping in the kick drum when they weren't playing, or hiding, hiding under things and hiding under drum kits and like just random shit like that. But also like my dad was, you know, he'd like sit me on the piano for a while. And that was where I kind of started to figure stuff out. Yeah. Like, I guess there was, you know, as far as like influential, I think besides what I was talking about earlier, just the kind of the attitude and stuff like that of just stay true to yourself or whatever. But also there's like a darker side to everything as well. Like, and it's almost kind of like a happy dark. You're happier if you're dark, if you're doing dark, like, you know, shit or something, like, you know, like if it's like a more cathartic, scarier place when you're done with that. I think it was my dad that told me, you know, he was kind of like doing that, saying something about that with the blues. And he's like, this is why the blues is good. It's because of this. And you're like, oh yeah. Okay. You know, that kind of shit makes sense. And yeah, the blues is a big deal as well to go, you know, as far as like influences and stuff like that. You can obviously, like, that first album is just like a big fat blues album, isn't it? It's not basic. It's very good, but you know what I mean?
Do you think Sabbath are one of the bigger musical influences, or do you think they've actually sunk down into the pile alongside other sort of like who's up there with them in your own musical kind of palette? It's
kind of hard, like, because it's so mad that because of the personal side of it, because of the like being on the road or whatever as well, like you kind of just, it's like that's just there already. That's already part of your life. But like I got more into like, you know, when my dad did say something about the blues or something like that, that's where I went weird nerd. I just was instantly like, I'm going to go listen to jazz when I'm like 12. And everyone else is like listening to like whatever people were listening to in 1986 or whatever it was. But I did love pop music so much. Like I knew as well that pissed my dad off. So I was like, yeah, you know, so that's why I like Duran Duran, and that's why I like Depeche Mode. Depeche Mode to me is like, you know, they're incredible. They're one of my all-time favorite bands.
Yeah, because I mean, Mark, you obviously, I think, maybe rightly you say that Aron's primarily a guitarist, but I think I probably almost as equally associate you with synth and electronic.
Yeah, and I think that's what, oh yeah, that was another thing about my dad. Like, so yeah, that Mark, that did happen where when I was 14, it's like, hey, what do you want for your birthday? Like, it's big, you know, 14's a big deal. And I was like, he was like, do you want a drum kit or a guitar? And I was like, I saw this guitar in a pawn shop down in LA, and I was like, I really just want that Squire, that little red Strat, because David Gilmour has one, something like that. And he was just like, I could hear him on the phone. He went, fuck's sake. It's like, I think I just let him down so bad. But he's like, okay, that one. All right, fine. Yeah, you know. And that was it. So, and I think I have to choose that path because I did not want to go through what fucking Phil Collins' son, Jason Bonham, you know, all these other dads not forcing their kids onto kids, but like, I think that was it as well. My dad wasn't like, sit on the kit, do the thing. You know, it was more like, go and look at it and just fuck around on it and figure out if that's what you want to do. It wasn't like, you know, you have to play something. But there's also like a very strong sense of in our family, like of like all of us feeling like we have to play. It's what we do, if that makes sense. I know that kind of sounds very corny, but it is like a...
Do your siblings play as well? Are they musical?
Yeah, I think, well, my sister sings, she's an amazing singer, but I don't think she really, you know, that's kind of the state of it. Like, she doesn't really do much more. And it's not really like she's really like chasing it or seeking it. Where I think from when I was like a teenager or whatever, I really wanted to start playing as soon as I could. And just learning, I wanted to learn how to play songs. And no offense to drummers at all, but I was like, as a drummer, I was like, how would I learn to play, I don't know, like a Bowie song on drums, you know, it didn't sense to me or whatever, you know, like I want to play Tony Visconti style. I can't fucking do that.
Yeah.
You know?
You're quite a hook-driven music fan, aren't you? I mean, given that whole kind of pop dalliance as well. And I think when you're writing from the drums, you can write a hooky drum beat, but I think you always seem to have had the instinct of, I want to put some really gripping melody in here as well. So you need to be articulate on the other instruments.
I mean, but that comes as well, like from how amazing is it that Sabbath is like, children love that shit. Like the kids love Sabbath because it's so nursery rhymey.
Yeah,
and it's got hooks and shit, but like there's no shame in doing a hook sometimes. It is a bit weird, like especially like say with the Olanza, we'd be like, I'd like look over at Sean and be like, it's pretty. He's like, dude, that's rad. Fine, leave it. It's an earworm. Like, go and do it. And you're like, okay, it's really hooky though, and it's like, because we're trying to sound like Lungfish or some shit like that, which is obviously like impossible. But you're like, no, I'm gonna make a fun hook in this. So that's what we'd end up doing. So.
Just as amusing as well, before I forget, I do think it's interesting that you were talking about being a geek when you were 12 and going and listening to jazz and stuff, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, it was like Buddy Rich and Gene Krupa and stuff that really set your dad's imagination on fire.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like he grew up, in that time, what was he, like 50s or something like that? But then he's listening to like the shit that was going on 20 years earlier. And but also like listening to like Max Roach and more current people for that time. But yeah, he loved the big band stuff, man. And you can hear it. I think that's it. It's like my dad's playing is jazz. It's strict, there's no like argument about what he's trying to achieve. He's not trying to be there's nothing rigid about what he's doing at all. It's so loose but it's like in the pocket. There's there's like a thing that's I was looking through earlier, and I was thinking like the lock between Terrence and my dad, like Geezer and my dad, is so important as well for Sabbath. And just having that looseness, it's like I can't say the word elasticity, going on. And it's incredible what they did.
Yeah, there's a really deep groove in Sabbath, which I think is a thing that's always attracted me to their music, and it's what makes those. I think that's where the Doom thing comes from. That being called Doom comes from. It's got that push to it, which makes you want to move your body, which a lot of metal really doesn't have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've basically put your finger on it there, because I'm not a big metal fan, but I was, like, Black Sabbath was probably one of the first metal bands I really enjoyed, and it's because it's got that analog quality, whereas so much metal kind of gravitated towards almost like geometric precision, especially with sharper production and really clicky drums and kick drums and all that kind of stuff. Like Black Sabbath always had that bluesy, stretchy, kind of swampy, elastic kind of feel to it, and I think it's obviously no wonder that they were credited with pioneering the kind of stonery doom thing, because that is a much looser form of metal.
Yeah, I mean, and they were
more human, in fact.
They were coming from that circuit, it's like Bonham and to some degree like Zeppelin as well. But Zeppelin just, they were blatantly ripping off stuff like all the left, right, and center. But anyway, I fucking love Zeppelin. But it's that thing of like, they were running they were on the late part of the same blues circuits that all the older guys were doing. They were just a little bit younger or whatever. But then it's like, I don't know what they did, but they just suddenly went, no, let's make it more fucked up and dark. And that's the thing. Yeah. It's pretty mind blowing sometimes to think that they kind of created a genre or two or three. I don't know, whatever. It's kind of mad, really.
To get out the road, and for any of the groupies that are on here listening, man, do you have any, really vivid recollections of moments in those early years with Sabbath that jump into your head?
Yeah. I mean, I think as far as them, like all hanging out or something like that, like, we're all just sitting at a table or like some hijinks going on like that. I think that was kind of kept away in a very good way from the kids. Things that I remember are more like that we were a unit, that we were good, like there was a family atmosphere. Sounds really weird to say, but it was like there was a family vibe to the whole thing. I'm really sorry I said the word vibe. But like a memory that I had was like being sat with my mom and maybe a couple other family, like, relatives in the band, way back on like these bleachers somewhere, you know, or in an auditorium. It's really dark. And these people had clocked that we were part of the band. They started to climb over the bleacher or, you know, climb over the seats because they were just like, I think they just wanted to come and hang out, I guess. I don't know. But I'm only like 4 or 3 or something like that. I was really small. And I was just like, what's going on? And then suddenly I do remember just being like, you know, we're watching the band, which is, I was just like, this is so nice. So like, I remember going like, I love this. I can see what my dad's doing. And then just being fucking ushered. And it's fine. The guys that were looking after us were always, they were sound as fuck. So it doesn't matter. But they needed to do something. They were like, well, they can't have these people coming up to us. So they just like ushered us back to the big, you know, like the dressing room with the big light on. And then you're like no windows or anything. You're just sitting in there like, fuck. You know, again, and you could just hear every night. I remember hearing like War Pigs at the end. You know, it's like, okay, that means Dad's going to be back in the room in about 5-10 minutes, something like that. War Pigs comes on. I know what this means. It means bedtime soon.
Turning death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh Lord, yeah.
Kind of like, you know, and it's the other time was like being actually on the side of the stage, and another memory, you know, watching the band and just seeing what was going on and being so small, probably being the only small person there with all the crew. I always hung out with the crew as well. That was a thing. Not like, what's the word? Not like out of my own volition. Obviously, it was just like, oh, I was being looked after by the crew at that point, or, you know, just kind of standing around. And somebody just suddenly like they showed me these green ear defenders that looked really cool, and they stuck them on my ears, and everything went like just silence. But all I could hear was just the vibrations of like Geezer's bass and my dad's drums, and I was just like, this is perfect. And then I didn't take them off for like a month. I would just wear them everywhere. I was just like, I don't want to hear anybody. I don't want to hear anything. You know, I just was like, I was in my own world just with these ear defenders on. Like, I think eventually we had to give them up when I was like 10 or something. I was really like, no, I didn't wear them for like 6 years. It was just that thing of like some sentimental value. But yeah, as far as like seeing them, you know, I remember Ozzy would come around the house, and then we'd go over to their house sometimes as well. Like, and my godmother looked after me quite a lot. And Thelma looked after me quite a lot, Ozzy's first wife and stuff like that. So, you know, it was kind of more, there was a strong matriarch that was kind of keeping everything together, which is kind of like the super important thing. That's not weirdly, but that's what I really remember about Black Sabbath, is the kind of that part of that, you know, the playing part is like, well, you're like 4 or 5 years old. You kind of, you know, I remember the tour buses and, you know, my uncles showing me how to drive and tie my shoes, stuff like that, you know, random stuff like that. But they'd all be asleep, you know. I'd be awake. It'd be like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'd just sneak off to the front of the bus and like sit with my uncles. Either one of them would be either my mom's brother or my dad's brother would be driving. So again, wow. More family shit.
Yeah, it's pretty tight, isn't it?
Yeah. And like we had a like little caravan, like, you know, it wasn't like some stupid fucking massive tour. It was weird to go on a tour bus in the mid 90s. I think it was when my dad was doing like a reunion gig with them. I was like, Dad, what the fuck? And he was just like, I know, they're big now. It's just so weird. It's like we were traveling across the country through the desert in like the, whatever it was, late 70s, and like this shitty caravan thing. And you're just like, what is going on? Like just praying for the Motel 6 to be around the next corner, you know?
Did you take any kind of key learning outcomes for your own career from watching like your dad's trials and tribulations? Because clearly he had highs and lows personally and professionally within that kind of window. I mean, one thing that did occur to me, when I'm reading back about the history of Black Sabbath, I'm like, holy shit, that sounds intense. It must be really strange for you as well, reading back on some of those more alarming episodes, like that one around about Volume 4 when they decided to spray your dad with gold spray paint and really seriously injure him nearly, you know?
Yeah. And they set him on fire.
He's the brunt of, I mean, he was like the brunt of all these things, though. You know, like he got all that shit. I don't know why. I have no idea. I guess he took it. He's just like, yeah, they'd light his beard on fire, but they always wanted to do pranks on him as well. But obviously they loved him, you know, to pieces. but then did that kind of shit. That spray painting thing, I had to look that up again because I was like going like, what? And but then as far as the trials and tribulations of like the things that I would take away from what my dad saw, like, don't fucking trust the industry, fuck label bosses, fuck managers, just all these people. Don't trust any of them. Don't trust PR people. Like, you basically put DIY in my my life very early on. Like, once I was kind of, just being around it all the time, but also like kind of when my dad left Sabbath, it was on his mind a lot, and he'd talk about it a lot. We'd just be on the freeway somewhere in the summer, like stuck in traffic, and he'd just be talking another story about, another manager just ripping him off or ripping Sabbath off for like some insane amount of money. And it's that thing of going back to like just they wanted to do what they wanted to do, and like they didn't want any compromising. But there's this element of like they were very bad business-minded people. But but why would they need to be? They just unfortunately they got dealt the wrong idiots, or these pricks that kind of like just fucked them over. It's kind of, but I guess that's what I take away from my dad's kind of experiences more than anything. Yeah, it's just do it yourself, so you don't have to worry about these other people and stuff like that.
I mean, it's ironic, but it's also really interesting that by being the son of a member and touring with and being around literally one of the biggest bands in the world, certainly one of the biggest metal bands in the world, like one of your major learning outcomes was DIY. Which is phenomenal, I think, because the way you and I first met was Aaron is this guy in Bristol who's a DIY promoter. You can really trust them. This is the guy to speak to when you're booking your own tours. I booked all our own tours. You were the guy I was put in touch with. Yeah. The shows went great. And then it's like kind of a little bit further down the road, they're like, oh yeah, his dad's a musician. And you're like, how did this guy get into this line of work? When, I think everybody's sort of initial... what would you say, preconception would be like, oh, he'll be in love with like the big industry sort of one of the biggest band. And I think it's fascinating that actually the opposite is what's happened, and that's where that drove you. I mean, I can understand why. I mean, Black Sabbath were learning as they went, guys from a fairly simple background, and probably as a result were very vulnerable to exploitation by people who saw them coming. They were like, look at these naive young guys. Yeah, it does kind of make sense in that respect. Yeah.
I was just going to add, we were talking a little bit there about getting taken advantage of, and when you read some of the stories of other big bands in that era, like, I'm thinking like you're like, maybe with the exception of Kiss, but like other bands like Motley Crue and stuff like that, Guns N' Roses, they're always talking about the fact they're also getting fucked by managers. And you're right, these people don't need to be good business people, but I guess in those particular periods, like the 70s and the 80s, rapacious motherfuckers see a way to make a quick buck off of these guys who are a bit naive when it comes to how that world works,
Yeah, it's just kind of like, I mean, I can't remember his name, and I know that he wasn't like a nice man, but the manager of Led Zeppelin,
Peter Grant,
he managed that Led Zeppelin band amazingly, and he defended that band. Like I think it's in that really long film, the Stairway to Heaven film or whatever. But there's some scenes where he's just like talking to some people, and you're like, this is scary. But at the same time, you're like, yeah, in a way, that's what a band needs. At least back then, because there were so many guys, trying to get an angle in, just trying to like, rip the band off in one way or another. But he was just there in the middle going like, no, get rid of this guy, get rid of this guy. But I think he had he did some pretty gnarly shit. But anyway, that it's a constant. I mean, it's a constant to the point that, my dad's always been really open to he has a lot of friends in other bands and stuff like that. They call him up and go, yo, Bill, and they talk to him about this kind of bullshit, along with his, my dad's sobriety and stuff like that. And, when people are trying to sort their lives out, they'll give him a call. But also they'll be giving him a call like if there's just been like some gnarly, annoying management or whatever's going on. Because of my dad doing things like standing up against, Sharon and stuff like that, it's like, it's a tricky place. This is kind of where I was going when I was like, can I see the questions? But it's kind of like, but that far I can go. You know what I mean? Like it's just that it's been a long, that, they've had that going on in Sabbath since they started,
Your dad learned the hard way, didn't he? I mean, on a number of fronts, and I think musicians, as we know, there's no kind of correlation between how talented a musician you are and how tooled you are to navigate such a complicated business system and legal paperwork and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the chances of these guys and girls being open to exploitation is just enormous.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, why should we have to know that? But then it's like, the only reason you should have to know it is to like look, protect yourself. But it's such a waste. It's so much of a waste of your time when you could be like writing an album or like rehearsing or playing out or whatever. It's a weird. That's a whole nother fucking hours worth of talking. Is how to kind of deal with that stuff.
Yeah, because you hire people to deal with that stuff for you, and it turns out that those people are not actually looking out for your best interest in the first place,
Exactly.
and then and that's when it gets really tricky.
Yeah.
Like to wind this all back to the kind of easier stuff, the lighter stuff. It's maybe a hard thing to answer because you have to create a little bit of distance. But on balance, do you think Black Sabbath are overrated in their influence, underrated, just about right? How do you perceive them?
I think how people perceive them. Well, this is again, like, this sounds like my dad talk, but I mean, I don't care about how other people perceive something else like that. But that's just kind of, and I'm not trying to sound flippant. That's just kind of,
no.
You know what I mean? It's like, but at the same time, I think that they're in the right place. Like, as far as, I think it's perfect. As far as like, yes, people but you know what I mean? Like, it's I don't think they're overrated, and I don't think they're under. They're just kind of like they
deserve to be revered for the amount of things that they trailblazed.
And it's kind of funny because I was thinking like not necessarily for like the amount of work what they managed to tap into in that time, in that place, that era or whatever.
Can I just actually pick you up on what you said there, amount of work? One thing that did occur to me, and this is something that comes up almost any time we go back in time and do like musicians from the 60s, 70s, 80s, is how prolific they are. So like, I mean, you're talking like 2 albums a year in that early phase. And I think when you compare that to the sort of schedule that bands operate on these days, the amount is considerable as well.
Yeah. And that's down to, isn't it? I mean, like, we don't have labels that nurture bands or like support bands anymore. Like, they don't have that. So, even though I was like, fuck labels, what I meant was kind of like, it's more like nasty bosses that are just kind of a bit like just ready to like just screw people over. But on the flip side, it's okay. So here's like for me, I'm always like, Moondog was like on Sony. You're listening to I know it's not Sabbath. We're talking about Moondog, but you're listening to that shit and you're going, what that music is just wacky, but it was on a major label. Like, and thinking about jazz, for example, all that jazz, all that experimental jazz, all that like avant-garde jazz was on major labels back in the day. And that's just incredible. But yeah, like, you could be that prolific if you had the label that trusted you to just, get on with it and go do what you're doing. But now we're kind of like stuck in this, like, it's just hard to get signed. And
it's quite different as well. Like, thinking about if a big band, a band of say Sabbath stature these days, puts out a record, they're on like a 12 to 18 month tour cycle.
Yeah,
like there's no space in there to write a second album within the year.
Yeah.
I mean, Sabbath were bringing out records, going on tour and writing, and then having another album sometimes 8 months later. I mean, that's pretty astonishing as well by today's standards.
Yeah, and even for that time, that was that was like some damn good work, like, to do that.
It was a heavy schedule.
Yeah, and with all that as well, they're like absolutely fucked.
Yeah, totally. I was going to say, like,
they're like absolutely like raging it every night probably, and then they're like, oh, well, we're gonna do an album.
Yeah.
It's like, what the hell?
Yeah, I was going to say, when you add in the hijinks as well, it's like the time. Where is the time? How do you even find the time and the headspace to do this shit? Whilst on the road and being mad with it all the time. I can't even comprehend that.
We should write a song about being fucked. Okay.
Hopefully this is the easier of the questions that we're about to ask. But what's your personal favorite of the albums?
Yeah, I guess like probably Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, and then Masters of Reality, Sabotage. I think you're like, if I, in that order or something like that. just because the thing I love about Sabbath Bloody Sabbath is that introduction to Rick Wakeman coming on that album. And also like my dad's grooves on that album were so fucking good. You know, just the song, the title track, when it breaks down into that bit. It's just like, you know, you just feel so crushed. You're like, oh my God. Mm-hmm. It's just such an intense riff, you know, and it sounds so good. And then it goes on for ages as well. And then best part is Ozzy comes in and it sounds like he's not going to fucking make the note. And you're like, oh my God. I mean, obviously if Chris Cornell would have sung it, it would have been perfect.
Yeah.
But thankfully Ozzy sung it. And it's Ozzy, you know, and it's like it's his voice that you're hearing, and it's like that's what makes that song. And you know, they sound fucking angry. I think that's another thing. It's like there's an anger in that music. It's like when you hear the song "The Writ" from Sabotage. Yeah. Like that is like pissed off music, which is fucking. I think that's it. Is I like it when they're pissed off. Like I like the thing about Master Reality is like they're a bit bewildered, but there's like this cool quality of like I feel like they're trying to talk about bigger picture, bigger things or something. But then by Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, they're kind of like, they got like a groove. They got a keyboard player from Yes with them. You know, they're having fun, but there's also like just, no, we can still just go. And you're like, Jesus, all right. You know, it's pretty good.
Do you have a sense of which album your dad prefers or which album your dad feels, you know, warmest about?
I kind of don't know really, because I think he would be, even when I was a kid, I'd ask him stuff like that. I'd always be going, hey, Dad, do you know the Rolling Stones? Or, hey, what's your favorite Sabbath album? And he'd just be like, I don't want to talk about that. And he'd immediately go off topic and start talking about Gene Krupa or Max Roach. It's like, you should listen to this album by John Coltrane or some shit like that. Or, you know, he'd talk about contemporary music as well. Like he introduced me to Mastodon. You know what I mean? It's like this, he's always on point, I guess. And still, like he's 70 odd and he still like goes like, have you heard this band? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, you know, it's like that thing of like, he doesn't really live in that past or something like, you know, and it's not like again, I'm not saying that in an aloof way. It's more of a, like, he just lives for now. And he's obviously, I think he's stoked or proud of what he did, but he's also like, I did that. Let's do this now, and kind of wants to move on, you know. And I know that I'm not trying to be guarded about it, but it's kind of like I'd have to ask him again. But I think he'd just be like, "Oh, I don't know, man." You know, not like dumb, but just like, like he'd be like, "Fuck off!" Like, I don't want to talk about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that's kind of, Chris and I both separately have interviewed Ian McKay, and he's kind of got the same mindset as well. It's like, I don't really want to talk too much about the shit that I've done in the past. I just want to continue talking. I mind, like, he obviously likes archiving that. Like, archive was a huge thing for him, but he's not really too interested in talking about, like, he will do it obviously, but you get a sense that he's not really into that. You know, he's just like, what's the next thing that's happening for me, or what's happening just now. I did have a question about Heaven and Hell, because that's obviously the second last record that did. Well, how do you rate that? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I dig it, man. I mean, it laid a blueprint to a new kind of metal.
Yeah, definitely.
And like, at that point, like there's so much finesse between them. Like, it's going to sound so weird, but maybe it's because of the time, you know, and because I was definitely, I don't know if cognizant's the right word, but I was very aware where I was because I was, you know, like that point. But they were almost like that kind of like Bee Gees level of like smooth. Like they were like, it's like they got this new album ready. It's polished. I can't remember who produced it, but that also helped make that sound. You know, it's like this. But also I was very much around, like we were living in Bel Air. You know, I was confused about Ozzy being there and then suddenly not being there, though. That was weird. Mm-hmm. And that felt weird. And then this little man arrived and I was like, fuck. But he was cool.
Little goblin guy.
Yeah, I was like, he was cool because he'd play with my Star Wars with me and stuff. Like, we got figures out, you know, like we'd just be like, hey, and say, hey, man, how's it going? And also it was weird because he had an American accent, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was like, huh? But yeah, I rate that album. I think it's a good album. And also I think, yeah, everybody played really, if anything, it's like, that's the Bee Gees. What I mean about the Bee Gees thing is how considered it is. It sounds like they really thought about how they're going to play every single fucking, you know, note on that album. But then
it's really highly rated. I mean, I did go through quite a number of lists, like fan lists in preparation for the show. And I mean, that was comfortably in the top 5 for a lot.
Yeah. There's a fucking somebody with a tattoo of that, you know, the illustration of their faces on the back.
Yeah.
I've seen there's somebody's got that on their body.
Fucking hell.
But I think, yeah, like I remember we all lived there together, you know, it's like I think we lived in, my dad being my dad, I think we lived in the garage. Outside, there's like the big house that we could have lived in, but we lived across the drive in the side garage, you know, in the flat. but
yeah,
it's fine.
Agoraphobic, yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. I think that's like, you know, maybe that's why you found, you know, like I was trying to sleep under a van at one time, you know. We're cool.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But anyway, like it's like
in a kick drum under a van.
Yeah, you know, we're cool. But like I think. It was cool. I wasn't used to the vocals, but I could also see why Tony was like, Ozzy cannot do this album. But it's just the funny part about it is the fact that then Ozzy just made a bunch of fucking rad albums.
He did.
Whatever. Mm-hmm. You know, like he just went off and did his own thing and it was absolutely mint. Like I love Ozzy's stuff. It's really good. He's savvy, always had like an incredible guitar player every time.
For sure, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think he came out better in the 80s, I think, musically.
Oh, totally.
Overall, you know, than Sabbath did, sadly. Because I think, you know, that some of the 80s records were supposed to be Tony's records, right? And it never really, and it was became Sabbath as a result. I mean, I know your dad playing the Born Again as well.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, Ozzy got good songwriters in.
Yeah, you know?
Yeah, and I guess that helps when you're trying to be really fucking commercial, which is, I guess, what he was doing.
Yeah.
In the context of this as well, obviously, we're kind of taking a deeper dive into Never Say Die. That was Rick's choice. It's what he thought was the most unsung.
Mean as a tiger, society's own child. Those that try to burn him pay. You don't do that to Johnny Play. He's the meanest guy around.
I guess we're kind of skirting around it here. Which do you, or is there one in particular you think is the most unsung of the albums? And I do want to add a caveat here, because do you have like conflicted emotions for some of the Sabbath records that your dad's not on that you maybe still quite like?
I'm not conflicted because I don't listen to them. Like I don't give a shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I don't know. It's not Black Sabbath. That's the thing. Mm-hmm. It's just straight up like, it's weird when I meet metal fans or Sabbath fans that are like, no, the best era is Dio or the best, you know, whatever. And you're going like, what are you talking about? But so, you know, you're watching Jesus Lizard the other night and you're going like, you cannot replace any of these members with somebody else. It wouldn't work.
They tried and they met with indifference, didn't they?
Yeah. It doesn't. It's just that thing. Like, so I'm not really conflicted because I don't really like. I think I heard Mob Rules once, and I was like, nah, you know, or something. But you know, out of respect for the other guys, though, you know, I know that they're good players and stuff like that. But it's not for me. It's not Sabbath. It's just that's my stance on it as a fan. It's nothing to do with my dad being who he is. being the original member and founding member. It's more to do with just like listening to a band and being a fan of that band and going like, why the fuck did that happen? The reason Heaven and Hell works is because it's kind of like how AC/DC's Back in Black works.
Yeah, totally.
I'm not sure about any other album after that album with I can't remember the dude's name. He's amazing.
Tony Martin.
Yeah, no, sorry, with AC/DC.
All right, sorry, Angus Young. No, not Angus Young. Fuck off, Mark. Bon Scott and Brian Johnson. Brian Johnson, I guess, is what you're talking about.
Yeah,
took over.
Yeah, and like it was a different band, but they the thing is, I think they do have good albums after Bon Scott died. But it's a bit similar, you know. It's the same.
Yeah.
Where like that one album, Back in Black and Heaven and Hell, to me are quite similar. In fact, they might have been around the same release.
I think you're probably right. Yeah.
But then everything after that is like, well, you know, they could have just done something else. I really wish that Tony would have done something else rather.
Well, I mean, Tony tried to, didn't he? I mean, because Seventh Son wasn't meant to be Sabbath. He was kind of pressurized into that.
He had to put the name back in it, didn't he?
It was the same with Born Again as well. I mean, and your dad plays on that record, so that must have been quite unusual as well for like Tony going, actually, this is not a Sabbath record, and the label, and then the band playing on the record going, no, this is not a Sabbath record, and then the label going, actually, it kind of has to be a Sabbath record because nobody knows who you are, Tony.
That album's kind of fun. Born Again is just it's such a weird thing to look at. It's like looking at something that
like cover.
it's like if you like shot a dog with a shotgun or something. You just I'm sorry, what is that? What the and it's still, you know, like The Fly, you know, like in The Fly, like when they teleport to the other chamber.
Yeah, like Brundlefly.
Yeah, and it's just all, you know, like that's Born Again.
Yeah.
Like, oh my god, what's going on?
Yeah, I think
the dog comment's a bit rough, but yeah, the Brundlefly is thing. It's just like, but I mean, Ian Gillan is on it, and you're like, holy shit, like this is amazing.
Yeah.
But again, it's not Sabbath, and even though my dad's on it, it's still not Sabbath. You need all four of them to be there.
Is there a standout that really kind of like suggests itself to you in terms of the undersung Sabbath records?
I guess that's going to be Technical Ecstasy. But it's pretty meh, and this is going to sound favorite, but again, I love my dad's track on it, the Beatles track. And you're going like, what? And there's a music video for it. Like, how high were people? It's like an actual music video, and my dad's on these, like, he's like on a riser that looks like the side. It's like he's on top of a house, and they just put drums on like, you know, the second floor. Like Tony does a solo from the corner and shit, and you're like, what the hell is this? And it's a really weird video, but that song's beautiful. And we used to play it on the piano at home and stuff like that. So it's called "It's All Right."
Yeah, it's a good song. That's a good song.
Yeah, and like the little groove in it, it's like, it just sounds like, it's like, damn, I wish my dad would have worked with Lennon, because I know he loved him. He loved him, like he loved him to pieces. You can really hear that, and I love it. I love it when, I think it was, have you seen Ozzy meeting Paul McCartney? It's just like, oh, Ozzy really loved him, but Paul McCartney's just going like, hey, it's like, it's such a weird, but Sabbath loved the Beatles, like they did, I don't know how much like Tony and Geezer would talk about that, but I know that my dad and Ozzy are very open. So, yeah.
Can I just check the kind of the circumstances around it? Is it the case that they started writing that record with a different singer? Then Ozzy basically refused to sing on the stuff that singer had done. That's why one track's an instrumental, and that's why your dad ended up singing that.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. Because it's kind of a confusing time. I think I cannot remember what other songs are on that, but I just remember listening like it. Oh, the other thing that I loved about that album was the artwork.
How's cool artwork?
The front cover is amazing. But again, you're going like, what does this have to do with Black Sabbath? Like, if you get, hey, look, this is like, Paranoid, and here's Technical Ecstasy, like that's not the same band. There's no way. It's the same thing with Never Say Die. It's the same, like, these people that wrote Never Say Die did not make Into the Void. Like, how the fuck did that happen?
Mark, you'd asked prior to this as well, because I do think that Bill's a good singer. And was there any will for Bill to do a bit more singing in the context of the band, or did the audience expect him not to? I don't think that. I think that was it. I think he was keen, but I don't know if like it was. It's a bit the Roger Taylor's, isn't it? Because obviously Roger Taylor was in one of the Queen lead singles. Yeah.
I got to say, your dad obviously does a lot of singing on his own stuff, and he's got a really good voice.
Yeah.
Would you be interested to hear him doing more Sabbath stuff for sure?
Yeah, I mean, it would be great. Yeah, like if they just all imagine if they did like a 3-part harmony or 4-part harmony.
What would that sound like?
That's that Beach Boys 8 track.
Yeah.
Like Aron, what's your thoughts on the other singers that came and went, man? I mean, forgetting what does and doesn't necessarily qualify as Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
Who did you particularly rate, and who do you think was a little bit kind of slighted, or vice versa?
Well, I guess that's it. Is this like, again, Ozzy's, I know that we're, I've got like, no, it's only Ozzy, but if I had to like say like, obviously Ian Gillan's amazing, but I don't actually really know. I haven't really, like I said, I haven't really actually heard the other albums. Like that's very much on purpose. Like I just don't know what they sound like. So like it was at Tony Martin or something like that.
Tony Martin. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I think it's also a different kind of sing. Like I was thinking about Dio. I find that style so corny.
Yeah, same.
It's just so like wizards or whatever and mountains and stuff, and you're like, no, fuck off, man.
It's the same reason I'm not an Iron Maiden fan. Like when I hear this stuff from Dio, I'm just like, it's too clean, it's too clinical. It's just like it is kind of corny. I know that with regards to Tony Martin, I know a lot of people seem to think he's kind of pretty overlooked as a vocalist, like he was.
You know who's good was Rob Halford. I'll take that. Because I saw him sing with Sabbath in Irvine or something like that. I think it was in the mid-90s. Another weird, like, oh, they're getting back together. Oh, no, they're not. Or something. I think it was the mid-90s. But Rob Halford, he's pretty rad as a singer. I think he's up. Yeah, and obviously he's in the same kind of Iron Maiden-y kind of Dio thing. But there's something a little bit more like just wrong about what he's just fun. Yeah. But like Ozzy, he's fun. He's like a good guy. He's just really down to earth and he just sounded rad when he was singing. You're just like, there's like he's more like, right, I'm going out there and I'm fucking doing this for this band and for the fans. Whereas there's just something about like Dio, definitely, where he was just like, I am a singer, and it's just like anyone that's like that, anyone with an ego, I'm just like, this is gross.
Yeah.
You mentioned Chris Cornell earlier on. I don't want to pull the rug from under your feet, but is there anybody you would have loved to have heard singing with Sabbath? Just, fantasy football style.
Yeah, I mean that would be it, right? I think I think Chris Cornell would have been amazing. But then they did like a B-side where they do, I think, Into the Void or something, and it is good. And obviously, like, it's, I mean, their early albums just sound so Sabbathy anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't really know, you know, like what I'd actually rather hear. It's kind of I've never really thought about it. And I'm thinking, like, what would really work? Drummer wise, you know, I think the rhythm section, you just leave them alone. Guitarists, no, it's, I'm sorry, I'm kind of a bit stumped on that one. Like,
no, that's fine.
Very lazy.
Do you think, talking about, like, obviously the original core 4 members, do you think that they peaked at different times, or was there an era where you think that all 4 were like, that was them in their Goldilocks zone?
Yeah, I think they peaked at different times, or just like would then catch on again or something like that. You know, like they slowed down or something. Like it you know, one thing that's weird is like listening to, as the Sabbath albums get, you know, you go, what was it? Is there 8 of them or something? But what I don't understand is like how Tony's guitar just sounded worse and worse. You know, by the time we get to Never Say Die, you're like, where is he? You know, what, you know, and that's the thing that's frustrating. It's just like, damn. And I don't know if it's just like, it's not that he's, I mean, there's some guitar solos that are on Never Say Die that are absolutely brutal. They're so good. But at the same time, like the guitar sound or the tone is just, you're like, I don't know what's going on.
I know that some people are pretty critical of one of the producers in particular, who I think was a little bit indulgent himself, and I know Tony's been pretty critical about how that ended up affecting his stuff in the records. Yeah, in particular. And
that might be it. It's just like, and they, again, like just like lack of control or what they could do and like what they were supposed to be doing. And I think, as far as my dad, ironically, even though he was getting more and more into a dark place, and like, you know, he was like more and more fucked up as each album was going, and just, you know, using and drinking more and more, he just got better and better. Like, yes, he's my dad, but the song Johnny Blade, the drums on that are just insane. Like the shuffle and stuff, or like the, you know, just constant rolls and everything, and like it's just going the whole time. Drums through that whole album are just so good. They're so tight. And you almost feel like he was like, guys, I'm doing my fucking best here. But then there's just bits that are like, everyone else is just kind of like, it's kind of disjointed and like, you know, there's not sure what's going on. I think Ozzy wasn't just that you can tell that he's just kind of like not really sure what's going on. And he's like, but then the funny thing is then you go and listen to Blizzard of Oz or whatever, and you're like, see, he just wants to make that music still. You know what I mean? Yeah. He doesn't want to do this other stuff. Geezer's just tight. I don't think he ever lost anything. He was just a constant. And I think Tony's a constant and got more interesting as he went along. But the problem was that the sound was just, I don't know.
I guess, I mean, I really appreciate your input on this. I think just for my own curiosity as well, you've kind of mentioned a couple of names, and obviously Soundgarden is one that really comes to mind. But you know, which bands do you think have taken the sort of ideas from Black Sabbath in the most interesting directions? And again, I would say, do you have any insight on any that, and you've mentioned Mastodon as well, that perhaps your dad or the other guys in the band were really, really fond of, who they saw their sort of genetic, you know, imprint on these bands, but the bands were developing it in new ways?
It's kind of hard to figure that out, because I'm thinking about like newer bands. Unfortunately, I'm terrible with like contemporary stuff.
Well, even going back a little bit, I mean, I think the grunge movement undoubtedly in huge amounts. I mean, even like the Bleach album by Nirvana was just massively indebted to Sabbath.
Yeah, Melvin's a lot. Although Melvins are funny though, aren't they? Because they really don't like want to cite that they are Sabbath fans, and you're like, dude, come on, for fuck's sake, like you are. They're like, no, we do weird time signature. They're like, whatever. It's cute, but you're like, you sound like Sabbath, dude.
Yeah, you're not fooling anyone.
And like, yeah, and like, like things like, bands like Sepultura, for example. And Slayer, they took another side. They love Sabbath. You can tell, but you hear it. But they took it in like a completely different, aggressive, more punk direction. And that punk direction was, I think it's amazing what they heard, what they processed. Going back to that beginning where we were talking about your attitude, like they took the Sabbath attitude and were like, no, fuck this, man. We're going to be experimental. Like you're listening to like these albums, I think more specifically Sepultura albums, and you're going like, there's some weird shit on here. Then it just goes into like this dark fucking, these riffs that are just like, yeah.
That's the word, I think, because you also mentioned about how you took very much the darkness from the music. You realized that you were having the most fun when you were doing stuff. It was pretty dark. And those bands did very much seize upon the sort of sinister malevolence, the kind of occult sort of like hints, the kind of diminished minor key stuff. That's kind of those are the ingredients that they really built upon. Yeah. Whereas, I mean, Soundgarden, Nirvana, early Nirvana, Melvins, all those kind of guys built on the bluesier stuff, more kind of like,
yeah, that's kind of it. And then, but I mean, then also there's like, you hear, I don't know, I was thinking about like Cardigans. It's like, there's like this flip side again of like the songs just being like, they can be turned into like a pop song quite well, and they translate pretty well. But I think I'm trying to think of anybody, any other newer bands. Yeah, Mastodon's another one that's just like, but they're more prog, I guess, in a way. Like prog got like a really...
Faith No More as well is another one, obviously massively indebted to Sabbath to the extent of covering them multiple times.
Yeah.
On their knees, the wall pigs crawling, begging mercy for their sins. Satan laughing spreads his wings. Oh, Lord,
yeah, there's all these like, it's like I kind of missed this. They weren't on my radar because I was listening to like Unwound and shit. But you've got these like mid-90s compilations with Sabbath being covered by various other bands, like Deftones is another one.
Nativity in Black, I think is one.
And Deftones is another band that's like, but they're more like they're taking, the essence of what Sabbath means or what it is, and like the sound also. It's weird for me, like stoner rock and doom, when I go to one of those gigs, because it's just, I can't sit through a whole fucking doom gig. There's just like no way. Like I don't get it. Like it's just, I like a band that kind of stands out, and then do like 3 hours of it. And it's like, no, but it's a whole culture and it's all in. I'm like, it's not like it shouldn't exist. It's more for me personally. I can't keep listening to dinner, it's like over and over again.
Again, that's that eclecticism as well, though. Yeah, we identified at the start. Like you like a mixed bill. You like a lot of different flavors. Who wants to just eat potatoes for starter, main course, potato dessert?
I mean, but sometimes they just got like, especially like Sabbath would go, like they just went too far. Like we were, with Never Say Die, like you're talking about, that was too eclectic. it's interesting. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, like about Never Say Die.
Yeah, I mean, as we're closing up, that would give us ammunition to take into the chat with Rick. So if you've got any particular critiques of that.
I mean, Johnny Blade and was it Hard Road? Couple other songs on there that Never Say Die. But what's funny is about Never Say Die, I mean, the whole album, you're like, hang on, if they've been listening to like loads of Thin Lizzy or something, like there's like a really Thin Lizzy vibe going on, 3-part harmonies or something and all this kind of stuff. But then it's like I was saying to Mark earlier, it's like then they let this piano player in and you're like, what the fuck, man? It's almost like they're going back to their roots, or like they're going back to the like, look, we do blues and jazz, but it's like, oh my God, the punk movement's happening. All this other like amazing shit's going on. Speed metal's coming in, Motorhead exists or whatever, and then there's just Never Say Die and you're going, it's really... But there's quite a heaviness to it. But then they're also on top of the pops that finally, after that long ass career, they finally get on top of the pops. Why? Why do they even bother to do that? It's just weird.
Mm-hmm. So you think the album's a little bit anachronistic and a little bit scattered as well?
Yeah, for sure. It just sounded like they either had a lot of ideas and they were all willing to try each of them to carry, like, okay, that could be your song, that could be your song. But then, there's no cohesion at all. It's just, it's such a weird album. But weirdly, that's the one that I because I think I was 4 when that came out. So I've got like big, good memories of it. I thought my dad was one of the guys in the pilots on the front, I did also think if my dad was on the front of Paranoid, that was him like going, like that, or the shield or whatever the fuck. But, it's like, I thought he was on every album cover somewhere. But yeah, with Never Say Die, that's the tour that I remember as well. So, being in Toronto, freezing our asses off, my godmother, like taking me out to go look at stuff, and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, it's a love, like for me, it's like, I love that album because I remember it very much. But then you listen to it and you're like, what? Like Shockwave and Air something, and then Over to You. It's like, oh man, Breakout is fucking amazing. It's a bizarre song, but I think they have somebody like David Sanborn on it. Maybe it's really, maybe not, but yeah.
I'm curious to hear the case that Rick makes for this as well, because it is a very eclectic record, but I think it's maybe going to be one of those things where you're just affectionately struck by how many ideas these people had bubbling up inside them, and they maybe don't clip together particularly neatly, but like, it's still admirable that they were trying to innovate or do something,
Yeah, no, there's that as well. Like, they can't just keep going back to something else, but I'm like, man, like how much money do they have? Like what's going on, But then my dad does the last track as well, which is great.
Swinging the chain,
cool. Yeah. I think that was something to do with Teddy Boys or something like that, maybe. It was like, it was about my Uncle Jim.
All the songs are history now, about rock stars and their grudge. Let us cast our minds back to 30 years or more.
So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Aron, man, amazing insight. It's amazing. Thank you so much for that. It's going to be really interesting now taking these learnings, taking this to Rick and putting some of that to him. Because I know he's going to make a passionate case for it, and I know that he also had a few other records that were definitely in his mind. But yeah, this is the one that he's gone for. So let's see what he says.
Yeah, nice one.
Really appreciate it, man. Hope you're busy with music stuff. Hope you're busy with the family. I know you've got a young family now.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyone that follows your Instagram will see baby feet flapping about in every music video now.
Yeah.
But no, it's been great, man. Mark, you got anything else you want to add?
No, it's been awesome. It's been really good, and it's been lovely to meet you as well. Good to meet you. Hopefully we'll cross paths at some point in the future.
Yeah, cool. Cheers for the interview, guys. That was great. It was fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
If you're listening, go and listen to Olanza, or which of your current projects do you want people to have a look at?
I mean, Repoman, we're out on tour as well in France in March. Repoman's we did an album about 2 years ago that we're still just running, trying to push, when we can. And other things I do at Harpoon is like more of a drum machine thing. I do with my mate Tina, and Aron Ward is another thing I do, which is like double bass that I just mangle with effects and use a drum machine on. It's very industrial kind of stuff. And double basses live are really fucking annoying to use. But we've got a thing that we do, so it's good. Controlled feedback, all that kind of shit, like Empty Set, and Vessel. That kind that kind of.
Right, Mark, get some of those links under the posts so folk can check them out.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, Aaron. Take care of yourself, man.
Yeah, you too.
All the best.
All right, see ya.
Take it easy. That was a really great interview. Chris and I both really enjoyed doing that, and once again, thank you, Aron, for coming on the show and talking about Black Sabbath. It must be kind of weird to come and chat about your dad's music when you make so much great music yourself, and we do recommend you go check out his music. The Olanza record, as Chris said, is in our record club, but he's also done a whole bunch of other great stuff with all the other bands that he spoke about at the start of the episode, so please do go check that out. Now, in order to continue our New Year tradition of doing a really big episode at the start of the year, we're going to conclude our odyssey into the discography of Black Sabbath with Rick from the band Coffin Mulch, who also plays in bands such as Age of Taurus and Moonshine Docks. If you know death metal and you're familiar with the British scene, then you might know Coffin Mulch really, really well. They had a really great record out last year, and they have been playing loads and loads of gigs, so yeah, really excited to talk about Black Sabbath with him. He's actually chosen the album Never Say Die, which is a really unconventional choice, and it'll be really good to dig into that with him. So yeah, join us next week. It's going to be a great episode. Chris and I actually started listening to Black Sabbath before Christmas, like in anger, and it's been quite the journey, so looking forward to getting stuck in. See you then.
Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details.